everybody to the July 24th, 2023 regular school board meeting. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Grant?
Present.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Present.
Mr. Carpenter?
Present.
Mr. Leeds?
Here.
And Mr. Fulham?
Here.
Would everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 1.3, any additions or deletions to the agenda?
None.
Thank you. Item 1.4, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. All right, moving on to Section 2, discussion and comments from the board. Item 2.1, legislative.
I'll relinquish my time to Mr. Hall and Ms. Nix.
All right, very good. 2.2, Butler Tech.
Sorry. Mr. President, Madam President, or Vice President, I'm still trying to put you in the top seat. Members of the board, thank you for seeing me today. Obviously, August is just ripe with lots going on at a school. We are gearing up, obviously, for the start of school, just like you guys are. So beginning in August is our staff orientations, student orientations, and all that. We did wrap up our National Career Tech conferences. I don't have all the results of the finals of them all, but we did send several students out to several of the national competitions that are there. Next month is our big school board meeting at Butler Tech. It is our strategic planning session, so if any of you want to attend, it is a public meeting. It's going to go over everything that we do. It covers all of our 5 goals. Our 5 goals are to be number 1 in student performance. Number 2 is to reach the greatest number of students. Number 3 is to ensure financial stability. Number 4 is outstanding stakeholder engagement. And number 5 is organizational efficacy. So pretty much everything we do at the district is around those 5 goals. Some updates that I do want to share with you is our second goal of reaching the greatest number of students. We've discussed that several times of how many students that we send away. We are on track to have an increase in enrollment of about just over 200 students as of right now. So we continue to work daily on ways to get more students into these programs. We also recently signed the final lease agreement with Miami University, the regional campus, to open up our mechatronic program, and also still in final not really negotiations, but just fixing up the language on the new aviation program at Hookfield. So again, those are 2 main goals of offering new programs for students, but also to increase the number of students that have the opportunity to attend Butler Tech and receive their credentials. So really, if you have time for our next school board meeting, come to that. And if you want to get a kind of a better idea of where we stand with all that. The audit came in this year. He did his financial report last year. Perfect audit once again. And our finances are on track exactly where they are going to be. The one item that he did point out that we're over budget on was the career CTSO conferences and competitions that the students attend. The cost of travel, as everybody can say, has increased. We cover not only the travel costs, the lodging costs, but also the food costs for those students that are there. All 3 of those have seen a very big increase, so that we are working right now to maybe, number 1 is trying to find a way to alleviate some of that cost to the district, but also, second of all, could result in some reorganization of who's able to attend those conferences and so forth. But we still want every opportunity for students, so we're always going to look out for the student first. So That's all I have tonight. Any questions?
No?
Nope. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much, Mr.
Thank
Gallo.
you.
All right, moving on to 2.3, finance.
We didn't have any meeting tonight.
Okay. And moving on to 2.4, student achievement.
So student achievement, there's not much going on for student achievement being the summer months, but I would like to recognize that we're all getting ready, ramped up for the season. I believe football camp has started, band camp has started. I saw some soccer kids out there getting ready to start, so I'd like to, recognize that. I know that wrestling went to a summer camp this summer, and I wanted to recognize cheer this year. They went to camp just last week, and the junior high team brought home the whole program brought home lots of awards. The junior high brought home first in sideline, first in cheer, and first in the overall game day. The JV cheer squad brought home first in camp dance, second in sideline, and they came in first in cheer. And the varsity team was first in dance, first in sideline, and the first overall game day. So they basically, sounds like they did a sweep of all the awards there. And the entire program brought home the banana, which is one of the biggest awards that they can do at the camp. And this was the second year in a row that the cheer team brought home the banana. So that's pretty exciting for the summer and all those students.
Very good.
Good deal.
All right, moving on to 2.5, MEA. Anyone from MEA? No? All right. We'll move on to section 3. And there's no recognition, correct?
Correct.
All right, so we'll move on to 3.3. Robert?
3.2.
3.2, oh yes, I apologize. Comments from the
Skipped
public?
right over you.
Yeah.
See that?
Comments from the public? Seeing that there are no comments from the public, we will move on to 3.3. What? Yes.
3.2.
Wait,
I don't know who's going first.
3.2 was comments from the, 3.3 is,
I'm sorry. 3.3 is legislative
Yes.
update. Sorry.
yeah. Yeah. All right, so now we're straight.
Yeah, I'm going to go first because this is our third meeting in a row, in a week, and now I just go first, okay? So, anyway, and, well, we see each other like all the time. Anyway, thanks for having me here, inviting me to be here. I saw AJ and Debbie in a Monroe event at the Garber Farm a month or two ago, and I think you had asked me at that time to be at this meeting. And I'm happy to be here, but my name is Nancy Nix. I'm the Butler County Auditor for almost 6 months. Yeah, 6 months in August, okay, 5 months. And before that, I was 16 years as the county treasurer, so I've been around these parts for a while. I was a city council member in Middletown for 4 years, about 20 years ago. And I think the school board is probably the hardest of all the boards, so I really appreciate your service and commend you for standing up for your community, and I know it's not the highest paid, and you take a lot of abuse, so I appreciate your service. First thing I'm going to do is just real briefly discuss the auditor's office. It's a big office. As treasurer for 16 years, I got very used to just collections, billing and collections, and we're the county's bank and investment officer. And not to minimize that, it was a wonderful job, wonderful people, but this one is a lot more, and it takes a lot more time, partly because I'm learning. But I just want to go through real quickly what does the auditor do, just so you know, and I won't go too long on this. First of all, we're the CFO for the county, and that's in all 88 counties. We produce the financial statements. We're the payroll agent for Butler County. We check every expenditure to make sure it's proper public purpose. Secondly, weights and measures. We inspect commercial devices to make sure that they are weighing properly. That includes scales at the Butler County Fair this week, when you buy meat at the grocery, when you get gas at the gas pumps. So that is the auditor in charge of that. Licensing, dog licensing, cigarette licensing, vendor licensing, so the state can track you down for sales tax, and also we know we don't want any vicious dogs out there. Conveyance, all the transfers of real estate property go through the auditor's office. Real estate assessment, we have 160,000 parcels, give or take, in Butler County that need to be assessed fairly and equitably across the county. That would be commercial, industrial, residential, and agricultural. And lastly, we're the tax calculator. So based on the levies that are passed in local communities, we have to bring that down into rate form to multiply by the assessed value and produce the tax bills that then we hand off to the treasurer for billing and collection. So the auditor's office, I joke that anything the state of Ohio didn't know who to give to, they gave to the auditor, because it's so many different things. And we have a normal staff around 30. We're down a couple people right now, so we are hiring. The auditor's office touches just about everyone, whether you know it or not. We are lucky to have so many great, competent people who, very serious, public service-minded, professional. It's just a hardworking office. I think it just has to be by the nature of what it does and how accurate they have to be and all the customer service parts of the job. So our motto, when I took over, outreach, transparency, and honesty. That's our three pillars that we work towards. If we make a mistake, we own up to it. We want the public to know if we tell you something that it's true and we can prove it, and outreach, and that's why I'm here. And I think Thomas's motto is also outreach, since we're always together at these meetings. Now I'll switch over to the triennial update, and that's when I was invited a couple months ago. Thomas and I were together at the Garver Farm, along with Rodney Creech, and you know, for a Saturday in June, I think maybe it was early June, for a Saturday in June to have 60 people come out to talk about values, it had been in the paper, it's a high-interest story because it affects your tax bills, and people already feel very overtaxed by their property tax bills. So we have a situation where, I'll go back a few years. 3 years ago, I was treasurer at the time, Roger Reynolds was the auditor, and the tax commissioner mandated a 20% increase in property values across Butler County. This was the year 2020. It was a reappraisal year. In Ohio, there's a reappraisal every 6 years, but then 3 years later, there's a triennial update. So 2020 was a reappraisal year, and that's when the auditor's office appraises every single property in the county. This is a triennial update where we try to just bring the market, the values up to the market values that are prevalent with the sales that are going on. So what happens is, in a triennial update, we're sending all those conveyance forms. That's when a real estate property transfers. We send all those thousands and thousands of conveyance forms up to the state of Ohio throughout the 3-year period, and they run ratios on those. What is the sale price? What was the auditor's value? And as you know, in 2020, 2021, 22, we've just had massive inflation. And we had massive inflation in 2020, and that's why they had mandated 20% increase based on 2017 through 2019. Because the tax commissioner is looking for what is the market value of every home as of the January 1st day, so that was January 1st, 2020, based on the prior 3 years. So when the tax commissioner mandated 20%, Roger Reynolds balked, and he said, no, our appraisers are saying it's 14 to 17% increase, not 20%. The auditor's office has in-house certified appraisers. We're always appraising, but the tax commissioner has the final authority through those conveyance forms. So Roger at the time said, I'm going to take you to the Board of Tax Appeals. I disagree. And so he had me as treasurer, or my office, bill at the lower values, 14 to 17% for the next 3 years. So that would have been 2020, 2021, 2022. And he didn't get a decision until September of 2022, and he lost, which meant that the treasurer had to retroactively bill for those years that he was undervalued. So those bills went out in February. I can't make this stuff up. I was still treasurer at that time for like another week. But we had to send those retroactive tax increase bills to 40% of the county, which was Westchester, Fairfield Township, and the city of Hamilton. And why were those chosen? Because that's where the most value was. They could move the needle more by pushing it all to those. So the other 60% got lucky, I guess, that the others took it on the chin. And they were very gracious about it. Most homeowners, it might have been $100 more, a couple $100 more. They understood we were fighting the tax commissioner, and they actually were not difficult. I was very, very grateful that they understood what had happened. Or when we explain it, they understood. Okay, so fast forward, now we're in another cycle, and the tax commissioner came down with a 42% increase countywide. So that would be some at 30-some, some at 50-some, where do you land? So that's when our commissioners, I made public comments about us being, I thought we were going to be around 25%, and the commissioners were going ballistic. And so they convened a summit, but in the meantime, we got the real number, which was 42% increase countywide. And so on May 1st and on June 1st, we had the commissioners had convened a summit with our lawmakers, and they were all there. They were very receptive. They understood the problem. They did their research. They went back to the state of Ohio. They met with the tax commissioner. They went to their House and their Senate and trying to help us get relief. They were trying, when Roger was contesting in 2020, he was saying the tax commissioner is using that final year, in an inflationary environment, that's the highest year of values. He said the code says you use 3 years, but the tax commissioner said, no, it's our discretion. So that's where the argument was, and so we ended up in that same argument again, that the 2022 increases were 42%, but if you had done the 3 years, it was 25%, and I know it gets very muddy very quickly. So it ended up that the lawmakers were trying to push it through the budget. Senator Lang was trying to push it through on a budget amendment to try to force the tax commissioner to use 3 years instead of 1 year. And Thomas Hall, our state representative, had House Bill 187 that we had proponent testimony and an opponent testimony. So it all came down to the last hour of the last day of the budget, and they pulled it. So we were extremely disappointed, but it was the 4th of July weekend. Nobody was really paying attention. And so it's kind of just sort of died. And we're back arguing with our tax commissioner. In fact, we submitted values at our values, the Butler County Auditor's Appraiser's values, and we already got them kicked back, not high enough. So we're going back to the drawing board. We had submitted in the low 30s. They're saying you got to get it up. They rejected 9 of our 22 districts, and I believe Monroe was in that. So we don't know the final values. But when we talk about values, we're not necessarily saying your tax bill. So that does get conflated, and then people say, well, no, it's the values. And keep in mind, there are 13 counties around the state that are in the triennial update, but then there are 40-some counties that are in a reappraisal year. They just haven't gotten their numbers yet. So this is affecting a lot of counties, but it's affecting some counties very differently. Montgomery County is 37% increase. We were 42% increase, but they're not worried about it, and it's a thing called the 20 mil floor, which greatly affects Butler County. What it is House Bill 920 in the 1970s. That was a law that was put into effect to protect homeowners. As values increase, rates drop, so that the levies you pass still collect the same thing per year. So, fire, EMS. However, in that language in the 1970s, and you can imagine what school funding was like 50 years ago, they put a protection in there for school districts. And they said, once you meet that 20 mil floor, the rates will no longer reduce. So that means when somebody's tax bill is 2/3 school districts, and those rates are no longer dropping, and you have a 40% increase in your value, you're going to get crushed with property taxes. So it's not an issue in Montgomery County because only one of their school districts is at the 20 mil floor. And in Butler County, 8 of 10 school districts are at the 20 mil floor. And it's just the way that school districts over time have structured, whether they've used substitute or emergency levies. And it's once you're at that once a school district's at that 20 mil floor, there's not much the homeowners can do. I mean, because the school districts is protected. So that's where we end up with Lakota and Fairfield, which is probably 1/3 of our county's students, when you say, 8 out of 10 are not in Lakota and Fairfield, but those are big school districts. So I just kind of, in my own mind, think 2/3 of our county is going to be strongly impacted by these value increases. And everybody wants to say, well, what's my house or my neighborhood or my city? You can't say, because it just depends on your neighborhood's values, your neighborhood's sales, your city's levies, there's so many factors that go into it, and what kind of levies. So it's a long process, and we're still, normally years ago, we wouldn't even be talking about this yet. It's just because of this massive inflation that it's being brought to our attention prematurely, because we won't even know final values. We're just now starting to look at new construction. We won't know if new levies pass in November, so we won't have final values until mid-November. We won't have tax bills until probably early January. So the reason for bringing this up is to educate people so they understand why. It's not my fault, it's the state legislator's fault. I mean, not Thomas's fault. No, it's an Ohio problem. It's school funding, it's too much reliance on property taxes locally, it's all the cuts that were made to local government funds 10 years ago. It was Kasich taking away credits and rollbacks. So we just have a crisis of so much being borne locally for the services that we receive. Now, people say, well, why didn't the state legislature see this coming? Well, they don't get the property tax. The property tax is local, but we have to follow the law, and the only one that can fix this are the lawmakers. And Thomas is a wonderful state rep, love him to death, but he's one of 99, and a lot of the state isn't dealing with this. George Lang, our senator, one of 33. A lot of our state isn't dealing with this, so it's hard. And anytime we start talking about solutions, somebody's going to lose, because if you're talking about lessening providing property tax relief, somebody's got to pay for it, or something's got to be cut. So even our auditor's office can't. Our auditor association, we couldn't get them on board for House Bill 187. They voted 3-1 to not be for George Lang's amendment to do the 3 years, because, Carl Keith, the Montgomery County auditor, he doesn't have this problem. So we're also a victim of our success in that we're a very high growth county, and that plays into the 20 mil floor. I think our treasurers have been very savvy in the levies they've run. My biggest fear is Middletown. I'll tell you, they have the highest tax rates in the county, the highest increases in values. They're at the 20 mil floor, and they struggle the most to pay. So, as of today, I'm like, I just got to quit worrying about Middletown. It's just, because I don't know what can be done. It's the law. I don't know that our lawmakers can do anything by the time those bills go out in February. So it's not a 40% increase in your tax bill. It could be 20%. It could be 25. It could be 15. It just so much depends. There's so many factors involved. So I just wanted to give you this bad news, I guess, so that you understand, because people are going to be asking you, and it's a statewide problem, but only certain parts of the state really have it like we do. Claremont does, Preble does. And I didn't mention CAUV. That was also in part of the bill they were trying to get through. That was pulled in the last hour of the last day. And that's 110% increase in valuation. Now, of course, there's such a big discount that it's not as horrendous to the bill, but it's still bad.
Yeah.
So, and it also depends on where you live and what kind of soil you have. So, anyway, I don't know what else I can
So I have a
tell you.
question.
Yes.
So does this impact businesses and residential?
Businesses will be impacted, but not to the extent that residential is. Probably
So
half
why-
as much.
Why is that?
The residential values have just soared. Office space has not soared. It's residential where you can see the huge increases in value. Because we had the pandemic and all the trillions that were just sprayed all over the place. And we have a lack of supply in housing. So just like rents are going up. So it's a lack of supply, and it's too much printed money that is affecting the rental or the residential housing market, not to near the extent for commercial.
So when our levies are, the millage is being calculated, that total millage amount that we pay, though, that's based on total square footage of all properties, correct?
Well, every single home, I mean.
But it's every building within the city of Monroe, or within the Lakota School,
Yeah,
or Monroe
yeah,
School
Monroe
District,
School,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So if that's the way that we're going to calculate it, and we're going to say that the money goes back to the schools, well, at that point, shouldn't all of the square footage then be in the calculation for this as well?
Yeah, just at different rates and different levies. I mean, it just depends what neighborhood you're in, what taxing district. We have 65 different taxing districts because some neighborhoods will overlap, so that gets its own district. So it just depends whether you're talking about a commercial, or residential, agricultural, or industrial. So there's 4 different types too. So that's why it adds to the complication.
It's property value, not square footage also, isn't it?
Do what?
Isn't it property value, not square footage?
Yeah, well, square footage is used in the value. Yeah, you can look up your property and see your square footage, but the value is based on sales of like homes around homes that are selling. Hope that answers your question.
So you create a good school district, and people want to move in.
Yes.
Thus, they want to pay more to be in a good school district.
Yeah.
And then we get penalized at the school district not being able to provide the type of resources that our kids need to continue that success. And then we have to go back to the same people that moved in and ask them for more, even though they just overpaid for their home because they wanted to be in a good school district.
Yeah,
Is
it
that
costs more.
a fairly accurate statement?
Sounds like a pretty good assessment.
Well, and
Very frustrating.
on the back of the sheet, of this 8.5 by 11 sheet, can something be done to prevent this? There's a whole list of things we have provided to our lawmakers. Now, is anything possible? I'm not sure. But part of that, there's an overuse of RIDs, residential improvement districts, which is forcing, I mean, it's not huge yet, but we're getting more and more where you're siphoning off tax dollars for housing development to get it going for the infrastructure and that. But that causes other people's bills to go higher because they're paying for all those new kids that are coming to school. So there's a whole list of things that are, I guess, making your tax bills higher. The forces are all going one way. Then that would include the types of levies that school districts pass, the TIFs and RIDs, the credits that were taken away. So I'll let Thomas, homestead exemption. He did have a bill that improved the homestead exemption, but overall, it's sort of a drop in the bucket when we need double the exemption amount and triple the salary requirement. So there's so many things that can be done, but every time you look at something, the Auditors Association is putting pros and cons on everything, but the cons are always going to be bigger because somebody's going to get hurt. It's just, that's just government.
Isn't some part of the problem, though, that we're funding our schools through property tax?
Sure.
I mean, that's been ruled unconstitutional for like
Right.
35 years.
Yeah.
But yet, we're still doing the same we have the same problem.
Right.
So, I mean, wouldn't one of the
Over-reliance
biggest
on
fixes
local property
be,
taxes, yeah.
I mean, wouldn't the big fix be, let's fund schooling that's constitutional per the Ohio Constitution? I mean, call me crazy, but
Well, I just think the state has their budget, and they don't want to shift billions and trillions from Medicaid to schools. Is that what it is?
Educate, incarcerate, three things we've done.
Yeah, and, or, raise the income taxes for the state. It's,
well, I mean, part of my problem is so if we can just willy-nilly do anything we want that's unconstitutional, I mean, what else are we going to do that's unconstitutional? Right? Isn't that kind of a problem? I mean, from where I sit, that's a problem.
I think the issue with the school funding is that you would just be sending it up to the state. I mean, and some school districts would get hurt more than others. I mean, that's my understanding, but I'll let you cover he'll cover school funding, not my thing.
That's a pretty complicated, topic,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
get that.
I guess my frustration is, we have over 600 school districts in the state, and all districts need to pass a levy. And so this is going to make it difficult for school districts in the future to pass a levy, whether it's an operating levy or a bond levy. So it's going to make it very difficult for
Yeah.
a lot of
You can be
districts.
glad you're at the 20 mil floor. You are protected.
Yeah. I do just want to point out again, obviously it'll be an increase in property taxes for our residents. We just need to continue to remind people that this district has not asked for new money in a bond or levy since 2013.
Yeah.
So, due to people long before me that have been very good, the board, Holly, that have really done a good job managing the finances, and they have not asked for new money. And they actually gave 2 mills back in 16, I believe.
16 or 17.
Yeah, so, again, they've done a great job being responsible with the money they do get. And yes, this is scary for homeowners, but, we're going to continue to work with them and be fiscally responsible, so we use that money for the kids.
The one thing I have a concern on is, when Dixon circled the wagons, he made a comment that, of course, this tax money goes to the county. He made a comment that they didn't need the money to start with. They didn't want to raise. So I wanted to give it
Well,
back.
he's just saying they don't need the increase, and
Right.
actually, the county did turn back their millage a couple years ago because of all of this, and I'm sure he's willing to do it again, give up the increase. I don't think the 18.5 million, but the increase from 22 to 23, I think he'll gladly hand it back.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
I was going to say,
Yes, Al.
it's going to make schools look a little richer,
it is.
which will affect the state funding going down a little bit. But,
Yeah.
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 So there's that, too.
It's all these levers, yes.
Yep.
And that's why it's just impossible to answer those questions. Anyone else?
Are we locked in at 42?
No. We're going back and forth.
37, 38, you
You're,
said no?
I'll just tell you, you're in the 30s.
So 39%?
We sent up low 30, it came back at a little more than what we sent up. So,
And how is that determined for Monroe versus Westchester or Fairfield? Like, what, I know it's a very complicated
well, actually,
approach,
the commissioner, the tax commissioner at the state, it's really not that complicated. They just take all the value and take the auditor value, and there's your ratio. You sold this many houses for whatever price, and that's the value you had, and you need to get it up to 90% of that value. So if we're only at, 60%, we got to move it up to 90, we got to move you up 30%, or between 60 and 90. It's not really that complicated for them. That's why they can just spit it out for all 88 counties.
So will Monroe be less than 39% in your estimate?
Yeah.
Or smaller? Or
I mean,
will it be
I saw,
higher because we're smaller?
we don't know because we're haggling right now. We sent it up a couple Fridays ago, we just got it back today. Monroe was one of those on that list of 9, because I was thinking it was all Thomases. It was Liberty, Middletown, Madison, and Monroe. You didn't hear me.
Well, haggle hard for that group.
4 of the 9 are Thomases. And I think, I just think it was in the low 30s, and it was a couple more percentage they wanted to go up.
So Monroe may not see that 39, it could be lower.
Low 30s, yeah,
Low 30s for our district.
yeah, for value increase.
I'll take your 39, but take my 110.
Well, just stay tuned, because this story isn't over. Thomas will tell you what his thoughts are on it, because it's ever changing. We just heard back from the tax commissioner today. So, and like I said, you won't get the bills until February. There's a lot of time between them, but the clock is ticking, and it's concerning. Oh, I was supposed to tell Holly. Oh, sorry. Mike said they'll be rolling out a new web portal for our financial documents, and he'll be reaching out to you to go over the new format and provide you access. Okay? And we still do not have a decision on the Rockies Pipeline appeal.
Okay,
So I asked him if I should tell you anything. Okay? All right?
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for the
Thanks,
information.
If you need anything, our number's on there, just call.
All right, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Ready to go?
Mr. Grant, how long do I have?
How long do you need?
I could be here all night, but in the spirit of everybody's time, I thank you for the opportunity to come and share a brief update. Auditor Nick's and the roadshow that we've been on the last few weeks, we've been going out trying to educate, obviously, the local officials, but also try to convey that message through our social media links as well. We've also done TV interviews and reports with our local papers, trying to get the right information out to the general public in regards to property taxes. But I think I'll start with something good, I would argue. Start with the overall operating budget. As you guys know, the state passes a 2-year budget. It's always either on time or a little late. This year was a little late, so we had to pass continuing funding for another week on June 30th to fund the state government. In this budget, I will not go through everything because we would be here all night, but I do want to highlight some of the good that was in this state budget that will take effect for fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25. Something that we've been really passionate about previous to the property tax discussion we've been having across the county is income taxes and getting Ohio to a zero income tax state. If you would ask me that 3 years ago, whenever I took office, I would have told you it would probably never happen. In our first budget, we went, in 2021, we went from 9 income tax brackets down to 4. This budget took it from 4 to 2. That is not, of course, counting the tax bracket from 0 to 26,000, which of course does not pay income tax. What does that mean? That is a $3.17 billion tax cut for Ohioans. So if you make between $26,000 and $100,000, your flat tax will now be at 2.75%. Anybody over $100,000, you are looking at 3.5%. So this goal of getting Ohio to a zero income tax state is closer than it's ever been before. Other states are doing it. It is possible. Senator Lang and I are going to be working on legislation this fall to phase out the income tax over a 4 to 6 year time span. Also with tax reform and tax relief, 92% of small businesses in the state of Ohio will no longer have to pay a CAT tax, commercial activities tax. For businesses grossing $3 million or less in fiscal year 24 and then $6 million or less in fiscal year 2025, they wouldn't have to pay that CAT tax anymore. So significant tax reform as far as income tax and as far as the CAT tax. The comment was, in Holly, I checked with Holly before I got up here and made a fool of myself. Comment was made about school funding 1997, so I was 2 years old whenever it was ruled unconstitutional. That is how long it's been. In 2021, December of 2020, Holly called me and Tom called me. You were my first meeting that I had in the official, not the official capacity, but right before the official capacity, talk about school funding. In 2021, we of course enacted Cupp-Patterson, which was the fair school funding model. Took the cap off of Monroe for you guys specifically. And in this budget, we passed the second enactment of fair school funding, Cupp-Patterson. To fully phase in Cupp-Patterson, we're going to need one more budget, which would be fiscal year 2026 to fiscal year 2027. But for this budget, you guys want to talk, we'll talk about, numbers here, and I confirmed these numbers with Holly to make sure that I'm telling you guys. You guys will see an increase from fiscal year 23 to 24 of 23.9%, 24% of funds from the state. And then fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25, it would be a 12% increase. Not every school in Butler County got an increase from the state. But what we did, and this is kind of the bigger talking point to education, so the House was dead set on funding public education. The Senate, this is no disrespect to Senator Lang, I love Senator Lang to death, the Senate President is a huge proponent of universal school choice. So we were kind of battling with the Senate leadership on what to do in this budget as in regards to education. So we did both. We funded the second round of Cut Patterson with fair school funding. We used the fiscal year 2022 inputs, which was something we heard from a lot of our public schools, which gave them that increase in funds. But we also expanded universal school choice up to 450%. So most families living in Butler County will be able to utilize the universal school choice. It was a huge thing for the Senate President to have. He is obviously more school choice than our speaker. And I'll kind of stop on that front, but that was the education part of our budget right there. Butler Tech, I knew Brett Guido was going to be here, so I wanted to make sure that, when we took the cap off of Monroe, we also took the cap off of Career Tech. In this budget, we're investing another $300 million into Career Tech in the state of Ohio. We believe in Career Tech. I believe in Career Tech. It's proven success, so shout out to you guys at Butler Tech for continued success for our area. Holly, you're not allowed to leave December 31st. I don't know if anybody informed you of that, but I look forward to working with you in other capacities, other things in regards to school funding and things, because you and Mr. Guido are my first inclination to school funding here locally. Also in the budget that we fought for was monies for brownfield remediation land bank money for our county. We provided another $500 million towards the funding of some of these Blythe projects that we have in our county. It's not just our county, it's throughout the entire state. We learned in the last budget that there was 87 or 88 counties that took advantage of these funds. So what this means is there's properties in, there's properties in Middletown, there's properties in Hamilton, where they can go in, they can use these state funds through the Department of Development, they can clean them up and create a site-ready place for businesses to come and expand or choose to develop in that area. So that was something we really wanted to work on. The other thing that was big in our budget, and again, I'm not going to go through every single thing because we could be here all night, was we invested another $750 million into this thing called an All Ohio Futures Fund. In 2021, we called it something else. It was a mega projects fund. But we wanted to lure and attract businesses that were leaving these other states, leaving these other countries to Ohio. Well, it worked. It worked with Intel. It worked with Honda. It worked with Amazon. It worked with Google. And it worked with Ford, just to name a few. The 270 loop around Columbus is booming right now with a lot of success of growth, with a lot of success of people choosing Ohio. We hope that this is still just the start. We're going to have the biggest chip manufacturing company in the galaxy in just northeast of Columbus. Obviously, to leverage the state of Ohio, we need to make sure that we are offering these companies incentives to come here. So we put $750 million towards that Ohio Future Fund, and these are for the large-scale development projects. These are not really for Main Street, these are for these big companies that we're trying to lure from these other states to come to Ohio. The state of Ohio, economically speaking, we're doing really well as a state. Office of Budget Management, every time we talk to them, their revenues for the state are exceedingly higher than the projected revenues that we have. So much so that we put another $600 million into our rainy day fund, making the state of Ohio have a $4 billion rainy day fund as we currently sit with the budget. Selfishly speaking, because politics is part selfish, we were able to get 4 bills passed out of the House in the first 6 months, 3 of which we were able to put into the operating budget, and they will take effect right when it was signed through the governors. Of the 9 pieces of legislation that we've introduced, 8 of them have had at least 3 hearings. The 9th bill we introduced right before we left, so we didn't get a chance to get to work on that too much. Something we're going to be working on when we get back is property tax reform. So House Bill, and I'll transition to House Bill 187 real quick. Property taxes is something that I'm not an expert on. I don't have a background in that. When Don Dixon called us in April and said, hey, we need your help, I knew he was serious, and I knew there was going to be a lot of work involved. When we convened in May and when we convened in June, we made a lot of progress in that month's time span of learning the issue, of learning what options that were available to not only our district, but for the counties affected in the state. Auditor Nix, she should have blocked my phone number a few times because I called her 4 or 5 times a day because I really wanted to understand the issue. I wanted to be able to go to Columbus to speak on this issue. So I'll be very honest with you, House Bill 187 was never supposed to happen. We did not want to introduce piece of legislation. We had full intentions of working with the state tax commissioner. It has not been said, but the state tax commissioner is an appointment by the governor. She came from the Bureau of Workers' Comp, and she is now the state tax commissioner. We had met with her with all the well intentions of, hey, we would like to see you use the 3 years worth of data because of the times we were in, because of what we were seeing in some of the numbers in some of these counties. And they basically, and I know I'm trying to be polite here, but they basically told us to kick rocks. It was not a good meeting. Since then, I've introduced a bill, and there's 3 other bills to reform the state tax commissioner. They basically told us that we have the power and we can do what we want, and you're not going to say anything about it. We introduced the bill to simply show the tax commissioner we were serious. We continued negotiating with her and her team that we believe that 3 years worth of data was good for our district, but it was a good policy for the entire state. Because again, every legislation we do doesn't just affect Monroe, doesn't just affect Butler County, it affects our entire state. So we continued meeting with them, continued working some of these other bills that we were looking at. Senator Lang was very successful in the omnibus of the Senate's budget of getting 187 in. We got all the way, as Auditor Nix said, till the last hour of the last day before they pulled the legislation. My belief is it was political. Auditor Nix did not say this, enough, but she was one of the very few that stood up for the property owner in the state, in our county and in the state. Her whole entire association came out against her on this. All the school districts, their lobbyists came out against this measure because of the windfall schools are going to get from this. And the governor's team actually came out against this because we were going against one of his own, which was the state tax commissioner. All those things factored in. I was happy to see we got to the last day of the last hour, but disappointed that the Speaker of the House made the decision to pull it. Again, this is the Speaker of the House we did not vote for. Majority of Republicans did not vote for. The Democrats picked the Speaker. The Democrats were against this bill as well because they wanted the additional funds to go to their locals. Again, these additional funds do not go to the state. These funds will stay local. So factoring all those things in, we did not get a single voice on the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee was the one, the subcommittee, the Commerce Committee, and then the full Finance Committee was the one that made the decision to pull 187. So in a lot of ways, we felt like it was political. It's disappointing because people's lives are going to be affected by their political decisions. We believe that 187 is still a good piece of legislation. This fight is not over. I promise you that. When we go back, we're going to pass probably 187 out of committee within 1 or 2 hearings. We're struggling because we need to do something now before these numbers go out, but we're running out of time literally. So what we're doing, looking at those options that Auditor Nix sent me, we have a whole packet full of options, trying to get together with all the associations, get on the same page, and kind of go from there. One other bill that directly affects schools deals with requiring excused absences was our House Bill 135, which is for 4-H FFA students. It's a great plug into the county fairs this week, so I would encourage you guys to go and visit, maybe not tonight with the storms, but go and visit our county fair. That is this week. And I think that, next week, starting next Tuesday through August 9th, I will be out of the country. If you call me and I get a bill for an extended phone coverage, I will send you that bill to your house. I'll be in Israel for 9 days, so I'll be visiting over there. But that's really our update. I would happy, obviously, to take any questions that the board has at this time.
Is there an area of the state that's running the show? Is there a certain area that is against everything going on down here, so to speak?
Yes and no. Right now, everybody's trying to figure out, one thing I didn't mention, we went through this fight 2 years ago, or last year, we're going to go through this fight again. Redistricting's coming up. We'll have new maps by Labor Day of next month. That's kind of a big deal. I'll say this, and I've been very public about this. Our job's not a hard job at all. We go to Columbus to fight for our constituents here in Butler County. When you start talking about, the speaker's race or things of that nature, it is political to a certain extent. And Bill Seitz, who's representative from Cincinnati area, he gave me the best advice ever. And Bill Cunningham says this all the time, everything in life comes down to one thing, and that's who decides on things. So when we look at the speaker's vote, yes, it was just a vote, and, the speaker has power for 2 years, but it was so much more than that one vote for, our seat and the people we supported for House leadership, because the Finance Committee was stacked with people that was not on our team, per se. Now, you say, well, we have 67 Republicans, how can you say you're not on that team? There's a divide in the Ohio House. There's 45 of us that wanted a different leader, that wanted a different mindset, that wanted a different path. This speaker is more willing to cut ties with Republicans and go to the Democrats for power. And we had a big problem with that, and we've still got a big problem with that. He's passed some things recently that are more controversial, that are more conservative in nature, to try and appease some of our members. But the reality is what is coming in March of next year is going to be a rough day for a lot of these people that chose his alliance, because a lot of people thought that vote was just a vote and we would go home, we would fix things in a month or two. But there's been a lot of backlash for those people that have voted for that speaker because of the implications we're seeing with the different things that he's willing to push or not push. In August 8th, we're going to have a special election. A special election should never happen in August. I had a bill to get rid of all the special elections. We were successful in that. We wanted that bill to be, or that election to be in May. We wanted that election to be sometime other than August. But that was what was given to us from that speaker. And I think that when you ask about, who's actually in control, I think that there is, a contingent of his circle that kind of decides everything. The other thing to this is, Senate President Huffman is termed out. He is running for the House, and he's running for Speaker, and he's got 30-some votes already in our caucus. So there's a lot of politics behind all of this. That's why if you look at our legislation, we're getting a lot of hearings, and we're trying to move a lot of bills because a lot of our stuff makes sense. We're trying to stay away from all the, the really controversial stuff. We're trying to pass meaningful legislation like property tax reform. We have a bill coming. It's actually a Democrat representative he represents the Bengals Stadium, represents the banks, and represents, I think, Mount Washington. We're going to call it the 70 under 70 plan. So if you're 70 years or older and you make under 70,000, or your pension draws under 70,000, we're going to freeze your property tax increases after a certain percentage, after fiscal year 24, after fiscal year 25. So we are finally looking at property taxes in a different light. And I think that there are lots of options, but for me, it's about what can actually get done. We talk about the homestead exemption. Homestead exemption hasn't been changed since 2007, 2008. It was the last time homestead was touched. So our bill took it to increase it to inflation, for allow people to claim more off of their homestead value, which would decrease their taxes. Democrats had a proposal that would spend, I think, $242 million, and it would have never passed out of committee because there was certain members of the committee that did not support that. So we are looking at all options. There's not a bad option, in my opinion. We are trying to move forward to help property owners in the state because these things have not been addressed in 20, 30 years.
Right. Good. Good.
I do want to say one thing. I do appreciate you fighting for Monroe. You've done a lot to help us, especially with our cap funding,
I think you were in that meeting in December.
probably.
I remember that, now that I think of it. We met down at the board office.
So one of the things I do want to state that the new money that is coming to us isn't additional money. That is just money that we haven't been paid, right? And that's one of the frustrating parts. I've been on the board for a long time, right? So in the time that I've been on the board, we have had, I don't know, probably $75 million that has not been paid to Monroe local schools. And as a board, as a community that needs to build a new high school or a new elementary school, right, what would be, I don't know, fantastic would be, hey, we have a $4 billion rainy day fund. We have schools that have been capped for 15 years. I would love it. In fact, I think we sent a letter to the state legislature.
We did.
Give us the money that we were owed for those last 15 years. You know, with the increase in the property tax values, it's going to make it incredibly difficult for us to pass a bond levy to build a school that we desperately need. Had we been receiving the full $15 million that we were owed for the last 15 years, we would be in a much different situation than we are right now.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, I appreciate everything that you guys have done. I think that's great. The day that Monroe becomes fully uncapped will be the most glorious day, because that will be true, like, justification. Like, we are doing great things here at Monroe
Yeah.
with 50% of the state foundation money that we're supposed to be receiving. So, you know, so it's frustrating as a board when we have a goal of being a top district, but the districts that we're fighting against are on a guarantee, or they're receiving 100% of their state state funding.
Absolutely.
So keep fighting for us. Keep doing what you can.
I think, and I, like I said, like Auditor Nick said, I would never want to be a school board member. And I say that because I was a township trustee, I was not a school board member. I think we've made good steps in the right direction, not just with Monroe, but as a state. I think the potential is there because of the investments we're seeing in our state to kind of offset some of these things, such as school funding. You know, the moment we do that for you, you know this and I know this, but the local government funding is going to come into play, and they're going to say, well, what the heck? You know,
Right.
You have that rainy day fund because of us. You know, you took 50% of what we used to have. We want that back. I have some ideas of, you know, for local governments. I'm all for, you know, increasing the local government fund back to local governments. I will do that, but you have to take off one of your operating levies. And they're like, oh, well, we need that. I'm like, do you actually need that? Because it makes you start looking at, you know, your property taxes, and you start looking at your bill, and you're like, you know, I'm paying for this, I'm paying for this, I'm paying for this. You know, the state will give you more money, but we need to show property tax reform and show your constituents that, you know, you'll take off one of your lowest levies or one of your operating levies that you've had for 50 years or 60 years, in an act of good faith. And I think that this budget accomplished a lot. It was not the best budget because of the circumstances surrounding the political circumstances, but at the same time, I think that in the next 2 to 4 years we're going to see some massive changes because after first school funding, which is going to take place, you know, the last phase in the next budget, the state's got to make a decision. You know, are we going to change how we've been doing it the last 4 or 6 years at that point? Are we going to start taking away some of these guaranteed monies that some of these school districts have always been given? And what that kind of looks like. And I think nobody's looked at that yet, past that next budget of what school funding is going to look like past then. And I can tell you that the more, like this this new group of representatives, like we're considered sophomores now, the freshman class, we had about 30 votes to get the local government fund increased. We fell about 15 votes short of what we needed. There's always a few people with plus or minus that you could count on whenever it came up to an actual vote, but I think we're so close in a lot of ways of taking more responsibility from the state and giving it back to the locals, which I continue to fight for. I think that Auditor Nix's office does a great job with real estate values. Why can't we trust their values? Why are we allowing an unelected bureaucrat in Columbus to decide what the increases should be? Why don't we trust the people we hire in our county, who are in our county, who know what the definition of a valid sale is, who we pay really good money for to have in our county, which is a good thing. But why are we allowing them to do a job that the state's telling you, well, our numbers are different, and you need to do our numbers? That's not how state government should work. It should be more localized. So I know that's a very long-winded answer, and I hope to continue to work with you. I hope that I'm still here, because that would mean in the next 4 years you would see an uncapped Monroe. So it's something we can strive for.
Yeah. Well, and part of the second half of my frustration is I feel like we're taking a step forward, right? Positive step forward with Cup Patterson, but then it's a step backwards with a 450% increase in income for vouchers. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Right? So it's no secret I went to Moeller High School, but at no point did my parents say, you know what is ridiculous is that I have to pay for my kids to go to Moeller High School.
Yeah.
I want my neighbors to help pay for my kids to go to Moeller High School. That never happened.
Yeah.
So if that's a decision as a homeowner or as a parent that you want to make, that you want to send your kid to a private school, go for it.
Yeah.
Right? Those schools cost money. Go for it. Right? So that's part of the problem. And then the concern is, like, what are we going to do for the kids who are not eligible, or the kids that are turned away from that? Because eventually it's going to come down to that, right? Where you're going to have kids who don't qualify to get into a school. And so now what happens with, like, your general ed type kids? I mean, how many kids in Ohio are educated in a public school? 80%? I don't know. It has to be an astronomical number.
Well, and I talked to Tom, or Mr. Leeds today. The Senate President made comments last week basically saying, this is the start of Ed Choice, and now we're going to look at funding more Ed Choice by expanding their buildings, because if we fund Ed Choice to 450%, there's going to be obviously an increase of enrollment, so these buildings are now going to be, need to be upgraded, need to be increased, and like I said, he's always been.
Well, who's overseeing this money that's going to these schools? I mean, it's a private. It's a private entity.
Well,
right?
it's a good.
Whereas, like, here at Monroe, the people who are overseeing the money that's going to Monroe local schools are 5 people who are elected by the local taxpayer.
Absolutely.
Correct. So now we're going to take how much money from the state of Ohio, we're going to send it to a private school that doesn't have to do anything that we have to do as a local school, and we're going to say we're okay with that? That doesn't make any sense to me. As a taxpayer, that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, and the other thing I didn't bring up, and I'm surprised I didn't get a question about it, Senate Bill 1 got put into the budget. So now we're going to have a Department of Education and Workforce under the governor. So my answer to you would be that it would fall under that department. And that came, that was a Senate proposal again. I'm not blaming the Senate. I don't want to get into Thomas Hall hates Senate. That's not it at all. It's just that was what the Senate, they made a Senate Bill 1 for a reason. That was a priority bill. But it was because there were, and I won't name names, but there were senators that would call the Department of Education and they would never get a response. And they said, we would rather take the risk of having it under the governor, whether it's, it's a Republican governor now, it could be a Democrat governor in 4 or 8 years or whatever. But we would take that risk to have a director, because right now, like I can tell you right now, the Director of Public Safety, the Director of Agriculture, I can call them right now. And if we have an issue in our district, I could have them come, this week or next week.
Yeah.
Education's always been that part where we've struggled as far as the legislature of communicating and working with. So now we're moving it all under the governor to establish that. And that was, again, Senate Bill 1 got pushed into there.
Yeah, hopefully that helps streamline
Yeah,
communication.
yeah, well, that's the goal, yeah.
Yeah.
But the oversight of Ed Choice, and I believe it would fall under there. I can definitely check on that and get an answer.
Well, that DEW, that's all going to be appointed positions as well, though, correct?
Yes, it would be an appointment by the governor, just like the tax commissioner, just like the director of public safety, director of ag. I think there's 27 appointments the governor gets, which would all be rolled under the governor's administrative.
One of the things that needs to happen at the end of the day, when the dust settles, the Ed Choice and the public education, they need to have a testing done with the students in each of them and see who's got the best grades, see who's getting the best education. But they say they won't do that. And so, if we are trying to, the whole problem is we're not pulling on the same rope in the same direction. We want to be the best in the world when it comes to educating our students, compared to Chinese or whatever, Japanese, doesn't matter. But we don't want to test for it, see who's doing the right thing. So, we're going to lose a bunch of kids when it comes to their grades and everything, because there's no accountability in the Ed Choice in a lot of the charter schools, as we have here in public education. That's the thing I'm after.
Yeah.
Well, and like the concerning thing, Tom, is, right, like Representative Hall pointed out, all of these big tech businesses that are coming to Ohio,
Yeah.
right? So I know we want to provide an education that creates a future-ready student here at Monroe. And Butler Tech's doing the same thing. But when you have an organization that is privatized, it doesn't have to, they don't have to do anything.
They don't have to meet all the we don't have to meet any of our qualifications.
Right, so how do we understand what we're getting for our tax money?
Right.
How do we understand what it looks like from these other organizations? Are they producing a future-ready,
That's where your testing comes in.
those are people that are going to be in the
Exactly.
workforce one day.
Exactly.
So are we providing an education that allows people to be functional adults, or is it a money grab situation? And that's the scary part, is I don't want tax money to go into a money grab situation when the product that's being
It's been proven.
developed isn't a viable product
Right.
now.
It's been proven that's what it is a money grab.
So,
Plus the fact we're not getting any response back from colleges about how's our kids doing in college? I mean, there's no reason why they can't have it in the computer where we can go in and look, especially in the state, within the states, what I'm talking about. How are the Monroe kids doing that were graduated last year, or year before last? So we can see what we're doing, how we're doing.
And I can just comment on that point. Colleges, they're a lot like the railroad. They have some really good lobbyists in Columbus and in DC. We fought the railroad in 2021 for block crossings in St. Clair. In this budget, we were fortunate. I think you guys might have some issues here in Monroe, maybe block crossings from a time or two. I've heard some little things here and there, but we were able to fight for able to fight with our colleagues. It was a bipartisan approach because of East Palestine. But we are establishing, finally, $100 million towards rail safety in the state of Ohio. Now, what does that look like? That could look like the detectors. That could look like some of the block crossings. It's going to run through ODOT. It's going to be a program. Our engineer was really high on it, because we've fought with the railroads the last few years with block crossings for St. Clair. And it's not just St. Clair. Last Friday, we were responding to an injury crash accident on 122 in the fire truck, and we got stopped. We were stopped for 2.5 minutes. So it happens to everybody. It doesn't just pick and choose who gets stopped. But at the same time, I think this budget made a lot of good progress. I think there's a lot of things to come as far as, Ed Choice goes. I think it's to your point, Mr. Carpenter, I think it was kind of a national movement too, because you've seen all these other states do it. And there's been this huge push here lately, but a lot of people are not considering the things you guys are talking about, the test scores or, the oversight of the actual program. So I look forward to, maybe working with you guys to see if there's ways we can make that better for Ed Choice in regards to public schools. If there's ideas that you guys see that you're like, okay, that doesn't make any sense, please let me know. I encourage you guys to reach out. And again, I try to meet with all of you guys individually to talk about different things. If you guys have any questions or anything like that. I know your superintendent, he calls me at least once every 2 weeks-ish. I think I want like a reminder. And we have a good conversation. But I appreciate that. I don't say that in a bad way. I appreciate him reaching out and asking questions and being involved, because there's a lot of people that aren't involved. And then when stuff happens, they're, well, why didn't you tell me that? Well, I have 120,000 people I have to tell. So we try to do things as best we can on our end to communicate that. But at the same time, I want to make sure I keep in touch with all the local officials, because I was a local official once too. And I know what it means to sit behind those chairs and go out in your community and go to the football game or go to, the clubhouse sports grill, which I love going to, as you guys know, and see people. And they bring up school or they bring up funding. So, Mr. Grant, I'm sorry. I think that was over 30 minutes, but I tried to keep it under 5.
It's all my fault.
Yeah.
We're like Tim.
Yeah. Routine.
He's used to it.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
I just have one other
Yeah,
quick
absolutely.
comment. Kind of on topic, maybe not, I don't know, but one of the things that I look at, I've got younger kids, and I look at the pool of solid educators that we're developing in the state of Ohio. I happen to be married to the best educator in the state of Ohio.
Had to say that.
She's not watching. No, but in all seriousness, the pool of good educators is not going in the right direction. I think there's a lot of factors to that. We can talk about that later, but I think that's one of the things paired with when we talk about constraints in the classroom, increased classroom sizes, increased certifications, increased independent learning, and just the different structure that the state has pushed down, kind of what Mr. Carpenter's talking about as it relates to public school. The amount of juggling that our educators have to go through and what they learned out of college, I guarantee, Mr. Buskirk, you maybe can attest to this, is nothing to what is taught today and how we educate our kids today. There's a big discrepancy between fresh teachers, veteran teachers, and everything in between because of the standards that change, because of the things that the state and federal governments push into our school districts. That scares me even more so than not being able to build a building, because we could build the most fantastic building with all the space in the world, but without having proper educators
To fill the
who
building.
foot the bill for a lot of their personal items, for a lot of their certifications. There's a lot of things that they have to go through, and it is definitely a labor of love. They're not the most overpaid employee in our county or state or country. And I would like to say that I think that that's something that should be, I hope it is being addressed, and I hope that you guys are thinking very serious about what 10, 15, 20, 30 years looks like down the road for our education system as it pertains to the folks who are going to be leading that. I think that that's really, really important, and it needs to be discussed now, because that's going to happen quickly, I think.
Number one, I appreciate those comments. I will say just 2 quick things. So I don't have the opportunity to sit on Ohio, our education committee in Columbus. We have a really good committee that chairs former Superintendent Adam Bird from Claremont County, who's been fighting the property tax stuff with me. We have a lot of bills in that committee, and I know there's always reforms that people are trying in regards to education. I'll try to get a list of things that's in their committee and send it your way to see if any of these things kind of go along with what you're saying with preparing the next generation of teachers, the next generation for teaching the next generation of students. So I'd be happy to, and again, if there is a bill that comes up that, you see and you're like, hey, this is a good idea, or hey, this bill sucks, please let us know, because it helps us go. And what we try to do is we try to negotiate, with the bill sponsor and understand, like, hey, this is a good thing, we want to help you, or hey, like, we think this could be amended and changed for the better. The second thing with building, and I didn't mention this, but, this whole idea of building new buildings has really hurt a lot of jurisdictions. We represent Middletown. They're $9 million short on firehouses. Trying to figure out how they're going to build four firehouses for $16 million. They're $9 million short. Madison, we're looking at building a new firehouse for our community. They passed a levy. The estimates are coming a lot higher than it is. So I think it's not just state government. It's federal government. It's, the monies that was pumped into the local government, state government, and the inflation. So the thing to remember is next year is an election year. If you're Republican, that's great. If you're Democrat, that's great. But there's always, things that happen in election years. We hope that, the inflation continues to come down. We hope to continue to work on things at the state level that we can control. With it being a split Congress, I don't know how much they're going to do on either side of the aisle to get anything done. But at the end of the day, all we can do is take it day by day and, listen to you guys, because, like I said, I was in your seats once. And, if you have ideas, if you have things that we could work on to be better, we're always willing to listen.
Okay, good.
Anything else?
I would just like to say thank you to coming out, you and Miss Nix, to when you come out to Garver's, there was a lot of people there that wanted to learn and listen and voice their opinions. And just coming here tonight so that those can watch online or watch later to hear what's going on. I think it's great that the community that can hear firsthand from, even though they're not here, they can listen later to hear firsthand what's going on, all the different layers that are involved, because there's so many different moving parts that are constantly changing, and all the different things that are involved, that just to make more people aware of what's going on in the situation. So thank you both very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, thank you guys.
Yep, appreciate all your time.
Thank you. You guys have a great night.
Thank you.
Good luck.
All right, moving on to next item, 3.4, Superintendent's Update.
I will be very brief. I just, again, wanted to thank Representative Hall and Mrs. Nix on visiting. We do appreciate you guys and the relationship we have with you guys, as always. So
Don't forget about laughs.
I will not. I'll hit it Wednesday, so thank you for that. Yes, as we continue to look at just not only the property tax increase as well as the state budget, when the dust settles, it'll give us a better idea of what the direct effect it has on Monroe. My fear, they talked about making some corrections to, help out the local. I don't want them to overcorrect where we're back to where we were. Like you said, Mr. Carpenter, that we are, we're way behind. We'll never get a check for all the back state foundation money that this district was owed. And so we're finally getting close to that finish line. I hope that they do not overcorrect and put us behind again. So as far as anything else, I just wanted to share again, as we look at our facilities, we had a meeting last week talking about just the small subgroup about from our large facility meeting to talk about some things. We're going to meet again this week. I am going to have the MCS agents that we hired last as the owner agents. I'm going to have them come and make a presentation at our August board meeting, just kind of share what they are doing. What I am really, myself and Jesse, what we're really looking at is we have a wish list of all the things that, we want to do to our current facilities. I know, Mr. Grant, you talked about the board has some items as well. Like, they're going to help us prioritize, what do we do now? what do we need to wait until we do a new facility? What can't wait, it has to be now, because this building, even though it's a great facility, it's 20 years old, so a lot of the systems are reaching the end of life replacement. Those are things that we have to do now. You know, we're talking about doing the roof here soon. Jesse's been dealing with that hot water heater for a couple months to try to figure out the best option with that. So those are the kind of things that I really want them to sit down and help guide us through. So we're making, you know, we're educators. We're not the experts on that, and they're going to really help us to make sure we're making good, sound, fiscally sound decisions as we continue the upkeep of our current building, as well as look towards the building of a new building soon down the road. So, and that's all I have.
All right, thank you
It'll
very
be
much.
all, you know, kids will be here before we know it.
Yes, they will. Less than a month, or is it? Yeah.
About 3.5 weeks.
Who's counting?
Soon.
All right, moving on to Section 4, Treasurer's Business, Item 4.1. Mrs. Cagle, you are up.
I'm asking the board to approve the minutes from the special meeting on June 7th and the regular meeting on June 26th.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. Mrs. Cagle, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Item 4.2.
Okay, next I'm I'm passing out my treasurer's report.
I'll send it out.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you need one?
Oh, no, I got it, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so, my report is in two parts. One is, well, three parts. One is how we're doing today, how we ended the year, one. And the second part is how we compared to last year, what happened there. And then the third part is, how do we compare, what are the actual numbers compared to the five-year forecast, which was in May. So our ending cash balance in the general fund is $36.3 million. We ended the year on June 30th with that amount. And our revenue increased $2,954,000 over last year. Local taxes were $542,000 more. The state foundation was $1.1 million more, and other revenue was $1.3 million more. And other revenue was more, mostly because of the interest we received on our investments. It's just gone way up. So that's good news. Our revenue's gone up. Our expenses increased $2,623,000 over last year. And $1.3 million of that was in salaries and benefits, and $1.3 million was in supplies and purchase services. All contracts for outside services such as transportation, custodial services, services for students who need help outside our district, those have all gone up. And less so has, like capital outlay, we have had, and some of the other areas haven't really increased, but those two have increased. Okay, state foundation. Wait, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. Our expenses increased $2,623,074 over last year. 1.3 million, oh, I just said that, didn't I? I'm sorry. I don't even know. Our general fund cash balance went from $32,707,000 to $36,321,000. The operating surplus was $3.6 million this year. And again, it's mostly investments in state foundation. Our expenses have gone up, but our revenue has gone up a lot more. And when you look at the next 2 years with the foundation, I see that continuing to happen because it's just our expenses are not keeping up with our revenue. Normally you say your revenue is not keeping up with your expenses, but this is opposite. But I mean, I'd say it's a good problem to have. The second part is I want to compare actual numbers with the forecast from May, and that's what this is here. One of these has it. Okay.
It's just one page.
Just one page. Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Well, you can send this down.
Okay.
As part of that, just for more detail. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so compared to the forecast, our actual revenue is $537,000 more than what we predicted in the May forecast. I mean, I think it's been, 2 months, and things could change. We did get more, actually, we got more interest than we expected in the last month or two. Expenditures were $81,000 more than what we budgeted. And so the net impact on the cash balance, no, not on the cash balance, but the projected cash balance was $455,000. So it's not that much off but it's just been May in 2 months, so it does vary. I was going to say expenses were $81,000 more than budget, because I'm always projecting in June we give attendance bonus, we give personal day bonus, we give a lot of, we have a lot of things that are paid out in June that you're just still kind of guessing and estimating, so it was a little bit different. So overall, our revenue exceeded our expenses by $3,613,948 this year. So that's more than what it was last year. So we went from a cash balance of $32,707,000 to a cash balance of $36,321,154. So we have good news. It's good news. As we move forward and they keep uncapping us, then there's been discussion about using some of the funds to assist with the building. And we've definitely, got our operations covered for now, even though we do need to add staff as we grow in enrollment.
Right.
And in other ways too. So, I think it's good news. But there's a lot to talk about, a lot of decisions to make, because we can't keep doing this over and over. There's actually money built up that can be used. So, and I know we've had some discussions about that. So that's good.
Yeah.
And that's my report. Thank you.
Before we ask any questions, may I have a motion to approve the treasurer's financial report?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. Any questions about any of the information?
No? Thank you, Holly.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for employing me.
All right. With that said, Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Item 4.3.
Asking the board to approve the bond fund report for June 30th, 2023.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Mrs. Hagedorn. Thank you, Mr. Leeds. And since Mr. Guido, is all the money where it's supposed to be?
It is.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Item 4.4.
Okay, lastly, I'm asking you to approve the one-year contract with Plattenberg to complete an other comprehensive basis of accounting report, which is called OGBOA, for fiscal year 2023. And this is in place of the normal GAAP report.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions?
I think that's a good deal, saving some money.
Yeah. Yep, I agree.
Okay, good, yeah.
Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Cahall.
Thank you.
Moving on to Section 5, Superintendent's Personnel Business.
I'd like to block sections 5.1 through 5.8, excluding 5.6.
Okay, may I have a motion to block 5.1 to 5.8 excluding 5.6?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Okay,
We had a few resignations here towards the end of the July 10th deadline, but the principals and Jesse did a great job finding replacements. As you can see, the hiring, some substitutes. The contract renewal was just, there was one teacher that had some licensure stuff needed to get straightened out, so he wasn't on the regular one. Some additional work days for our new administrators coming on board. 5.6 we'll get to later. 5.7, just some corrections to some supplementals. And then the 5.8 is to approve the amended administrative salary schedule and benefits.
any questions about any of the items?
No.
I did put the pins over there for you, Mr.
I
Grant,
saw
so-
that.
okay.
And I'll make a comment. There's someone on here, he's sitting right there. Jacob, you know how to make someone feel old. I coached Jacob, JT, in, was 10U baseball? Yeah. 10U, yes, so now I feel really old. So yes, 10U and 11U, so threw gas on the mound, so that was great.
That's great.
All right, so other than that, any other questions? All right. We will make I think I get this down by now. We need to make a motion to approve everything. So Mrs. Cahill, may I need a motion to approve 5.1 to 5.8, excluding 5.6?
Yep.
So
got it.
moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. All right. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Wait, was Mr. Carpenter first?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried.
It's recommended the board approve the extracurricular contracts.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions? All right. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Abstain.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. All right, before we move on to section 6, we will, pins.
Oh, yeah.
Gotta do the pins.
We have
Gotta do the
any of them.
I'm sure.
Come on up.
Do what?
Come on over to your new teachers.
Let's see if we can kind of alternate, that's the right idea here, kind of group up a little bit for me. All right. Everybody get close, okay, that'll work. I think that'll work, yeah, okay. All right, 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you.
You guys are free to go if you want. No, I didn't. I told them they had an extra credit. All right, now, moving on to section 6, superintendent's other business.
I recommend to block 6.1 through 6.5.
All right, may I have a motion to approve item 6.1 to block item 6.1 to 6.5?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. Thank you, Mr. Fulham. All
All right, first, 6.1 is just all the graduates have to be formally approved. They're already gone, they're not coming back, so just a formality. We have a agreement for some extended days for a PR person. I keep bothering him, so it's not to exceed a certain number of days. I don't think we'll get close to that, will we, Mr. Markham? And then Ames Webb is just a renewal contract. It is a screening that we use with our elementary kids for reading fluency. The managed services contract with Fort Edge, that is again a renewal. And then the 6.5 is the service contract with Conger for the facility improvements that I had shared earlier with not only here, but the central office and bus garage. So.
Okay. All right. Any questions? Okay, may I have a motion to approve items 6.1 to 6.5?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. All right, Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Fulham, or Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. All right, thank you, Mr. Busker.
Thank you.
All right, before we adjourn, comments from the board. We will start down at the end there with Mr. Leeds.
Well, first of all, I'd appreciate all the information we got from Representative Hall and Nancy Nix. It was very informative, and we know we've got a lot of uncertainties, that's for sure. And I guess we're all ready to kick this thing into gear for another year, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, and with
The
all
kids will be swarming next week, start August 1st, all the fall sports.
Yeah.
That's their
Yeah.
first
That's
official day, so, not that they haven't been here all summer, but they'll really be here,
Yeah.
starting next week. So.
We appreciate, again, everything that was done last year and look forward to another great year of athletics and in education in this building, that's for sure.
Yep.
And appreciate also the fact that I guess we found a little bit, another couple places we can put some 2x4s or something in the central office, so that ought to help out.
Yes.
From all that. When's that supposed to be done?
I don't know that piece. They said, we spoke to them, they're going to, they assured us that they would have the in-school stuff done as soon as possible. So tomorrow I'll reach out to them and we should get some more specific timelines. I actually think, I don't know, it's something the board may want to consider, is that once that room is opened up where the current training room is, they're taking one of the walls out.
Yeah.
It will be a bigger space. We could entertain having our board meetings over there. So
Okay.
once it's completed, obviously we'll have you guys over to see what your thoughts are. So.
Okay. And the other thing that I was wondering about, I've had some people ask me, are we looking to do anything on the other entrance before we do anything on the building or what?
What other, we're starting the, Jesse, you can give an update where we are with, yes, we are.
We've engaged in a scope. There's a two-part scope. One is the preliminary work and study. So Fanning Howie, their team, and Rambo might be the vendor who was the same group who did the delineation earlier.
Right.
They've identified just a targeted scope, so we don't spend as much money from that corner on the end of the elementary playground down to the road to make sure we can identify how much is there and then decide if it's a design issue or we have to spend a few more $1,000 to go after the federal permitting process or whatever. So they have that scope is set, we've got the vendor and everything, we give them free money.
Yeah.
So I don't have a timeline. We were hoping that we have some kind of coordination with the facility advisory committee, but I do not know for certain that it's
Yeah.
done at our date.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, at least we're doing something.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
And we talked about doing a feasibility study about where the next building would be, and so that kind of falls into play with that as well.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want to put the new drive in and say, well, if we're putting a new high school back here, that's ridiculous, put that in. So we're talking about doing a feasibility study of the different sites we've talked about and the traffic flow pattern and all that, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, that's all I got.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Mr. Fulham?
It's time for the short list of high fives for around the high. High fives to all the teachers, coaches, and staff who continue to support our students throughout the summer in preparation for the upcoming school year. There is a ton of activity going on behind the scenes, and lots of time is put forth towards practices, clinics, scheduling, camps, and tutoring to ensure our students have a fast start to the 23-24 school year. High five to the Monroe cheerleading program who recently attended UCA cheer camp, representing the district in a positive way. I won't go through them again. Mrs. Hagedorn hit them earlier, but lots of great individual and team awards, and that very coveted top banana award did come back to Monroe, so it's always a fun time for that program, and they always represent the district very well. So that's all I got.
All right, thank you. Mr. Carpenter?
Oh, man, I'm not ready yet. Jeez. No, just quick, I thank you to Representative Hall and Mrs. Nix for attending. I think that's wonderful. As Ms. Hagedorn pointed out, like, we have a live stream, so it's, I have no idea what the meeting looked like down at Carver Farm, but, thankfully we have this, so that's wonderful. But, yeah, I just hope everybody's had an enjoyable summer, have an enjoyable few weeks, and let's get to business, I guess.
Yep. All right.
That's it.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
So I just like to, I guess, thank all the teachers and administrators. Hope that they're having a good summer and enjoying their time off and preparations for the upcoming school year that's starting in about 3 weeks. So I know it's all an exciting time when there's a new beginning, another new school year. So it's exciting for the students and exciting for the staff and teachers and administration. So, yeah, pretty excited about it. That's all.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to echo what everyone else said. Thank you for Representative Hall and Mrs. Nix that was good information, and I think it will help answer some questions for the community, because I think there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think there's a lot of people that are a little, they're petrified of what the ramifications of this could be, and I think she shed some light on it, that it's not going to be a 42% flat. It's going to be based upon a bunch of criteria. So I think that's going to be a good thing, and I think it'll help answer some questions for our community. Other than that, I can't believe we're 3 weeks away. This year's flown already, and but this summer flew. So yeah, I'm looking forward to less than a month, about a month and a half. We'll be calling some games, and we'll back on the gridiron. So it'll be good. So other than that, that is it for me. So with that being said, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 7:43. May I have I'm not going to make a motion. I'd like to see if I can get a motion to adjourn the meeting at 7:43.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thought maybe you guys just wanted to stay here a little bit longer. All right, Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for attending.